Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hey, welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We're happy to have an old friend of mine here, Dr. Fred Arthur, an Oregon cannabis legend. Welcome, Fred. And over here is Mr. Eric Llewellyn, is our co-host. In the wings, John Cornett is ready to sing a song.
It's 420.
We have some interesting news about 420. It is April 20th, which is now kind of a cannabis holiday. We'll be talking about that and talking about Steve Hager. We're going to have Paul Krasner, a writer who published one of the premier underground newspapers in the world. And he'll be on, and along with we'll have a call in from John Saggio as well to talk about Fred and how we eventually changed the world through legalizing marijuana through the Marijuana Initiative. Fred was the chief petitioner back in the 80s on the original Oregon marijuana initiatives. But first, we'll bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Today, on the unofficial marijuana holiday known as 420, the United States Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced a plan to decriminalize marijuana at the federal level. The New York Democrats' support gives the policy a powerful voice as opinions on the substance become more favorable with voters and within the ranks of the United States Congress. Schumer's plan to introduce a bill to pull marijuana from the federal list of controlled substances, aiming to effectively reduce punishments related to the drug and encourage more efforts to legalize it at the state level. The legislation would not stop federal law enforcement from stopping the movement of marijuana between states where it is legal and areas where it is not. It marks a reversal on marijuana for the Senate's top Democrat as opinions on the substance have evolved across the political spectrum. Schumer posted to Twitter and in a public statement, quote, "The time has come to decriminalize marijuana. My thinking, as well as the general population's views on the issue, has evolved, and so I believe there's no better time than the present to get this done. It's simply the right thing to do." End quote. The senator also said the bill would seek to boost funding for marijuana businesses owned by women and minorities. Minority communities have been disproportionately affected by drug arrests and prison time. Schumer's effort will likely get the support from many Democrats and some Republicans in the GOP-controlled Senate. Whether it can gain any traction in a more conservative House is less certain. But his policy will likely face opposition from the nation's top law enforcement official, Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, a noted opponent of marijuana use. In January, he pulled back the Obama administration guidance that allowed states to legalize marijuana with minimal interference from federal officials. President Donald Trump then promised this month that he will support pushes from lawmakers like Colorado Senator Cory Gardner to shield states that have legalized the substance. 9 states and the District of Columbia have legalized marijuana for adult recreational use. Even more states have decriminalized the substance to some degree and allowed medical use. 29 states allow medical use. Some lawmakers support the ability of states to craft their own marijuana laws, but do not back federal policy to decriminalize or legalize. Lawmakers in support of legalization have cheered the increase in tax revenue states have seen, as well as the potential for job creation. A Gallup survey in October showed 64% of Americans think marijuana should be legal. A majority of Republicans think it should be legal too, according to Gallup. One former congressional leader also said his view on marijuana has evolved recently. Former House Speaker John Boehner said this month he'll join the board of directors for a marijuana holding company. We applaud this commitment from the Senate's Democratic leader Chuck Schumer and President Trump, who promised during his campaign to take a federalist approach with regard to marijuana policy. Trump's campaign promise was not reflected by Trump's appointment of longtime marijuana prohibitionist Jefferson Beauregard Sessions to the position of Attorney General, or any of the actions that Sessions has taken since becoming the nation's top law enforcement officer. With the President now reiterating this commitment, it's time for Congress to do its part and swiftly move forward bipartisan legislation that explicitly provides states with the authority and autonomy to set their own marijuana policies absent the fear of federal incursion. Doing so will not only follow through on one of Trump's campaign promises, but it would codify the will of the overwhelming majority of Americans. Our next story tonight is from Boston, Massachusetts. Massachusetts Republican Governor Charlie Baker signed legislation into law today that includes a provision expunging the criminal records of those convicted of certain prior marijuana offenses. Language in Senate Bill 2371 states, quote, "A court may order the expungement of a record created as a result of criminal court appearance if the court determines, based on clear and convincing evidence, that the record was created as a result of an offense that at the time of the creation of the record, which at the time of expungement is no longer a crime," end quote. Massachusetts voters passed a voter initiative in November 2016 legalizing the adult use, possession of up to 10 ounces in private, and cultivation of up to 6 plants of cannabis by adults. California and Oregon similarly permit the courts to dismiss prior marijuana convictions in instances where the offense occurred prior to the passage of adult use legalization. Our last story tonight is out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Cannabis exposure in adolescents and young adults is not associated with any significant long-term detrimental effects on cognitive performance, according to a systemic literature review published Wednesday in the journal of the American Medical Association Psychiatry. Investigators affiliated with the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine and with Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania reviewed data from 69 separate studies published between 1973 and 2017 involving 8,727 subjects, 2,150 being frequent or heavy users, and 6,575 controls. The researchers reported no significant long-term deficits in memory, attention, or other aspects of cognitive functioning that could be independently attributed to cannabis use, regardless of the subject's age of initiation. These findings are in contrast to similar studies assessing the impact of alcohol use and other controlled substances on cognitive performance, which have shown medium to large effects in their effects. The authors concluded, quote, "Association between cannabis use and cognitive function in cross-sectional studies of adolescents and young adults are small and may be of questionable clinical importance for most individuals. Furthermore, abstinence of longer than 72 hours diminishes cognitive deficits associated with cannabis use. The results indicate that previous studies of cannabis use may have overstated the magnitude and persistence of cognitive deficits associated with marijuana use," end quote. The full text of this new study, Association of Cannabis with Cognitive Functioning in Adolescents and Young Adults, a Systemic Review and Meta-Analysis, appears in the Journal of the American Medical Association Psychiatry. That's the end of our hemp news segment tonight, and Mr. John Cornett is going to play a song. Hey, John.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm here.
Welcome.
I'm going to play a song, but I need a moment, please. I need just one moment, Paul, because did I hear you say that at the federal level that cannabis is being considered for reconsideration of the archaic laws, or I should say the draconian laws that we've been living under for the last 50 odd years?
There are a number of bills that have been introduced to reform criminal justice policy, introduced by Wyden and Merkley and Bernie Sanders, and now Schumer has introduced a bill to reschedule marijuana and deschedule it, take it out of...
You know, my heart nearly stopped. This moment I wanted to say, my heart nearly pounded out of my chest when I heard that, because it's a celebration, but we also have a lot of victims.
Yeah, that's true.
From stupidity. This is a little ditty. Let me play. Goes like this. All we can do is wait, but do something.
Thank you. Instrumental. Okay, well, welcome back to the show, Fred. It's great to have you on after all these years. When I first came to Oregon, 1984, I stayed on your back 40. I came to town with my cat, pitched my tent on your back property there, and you were in the midst of the campaign to put the Oregon Marijuana Initiative on the ballot.
Yes,
and you were a chief petitioner on how many of the Oregon Marijuana Initiative drives in the 80s?
Two.
Two.
84 and then the 86.
86, the one that actually made the ballot. And
yep.
That was quite a campaign. We had the whole federal government come down on top of us, didn't we?
Oh, even Nanny was here.
Yep, Nancy Reagan came across the state to just say no. She toured the state, as I recall, for like 3 days or something.
Her and Norma Paulus,
yeah,
the Secretary of State.
And she had cheated us off the ballot in 1984.
We developed a chant, Norma can't count, Norma can't count.
Right. She was the Republican Secretary of State way back.
Nanny got her involved. I'm pretty sure. I'm not I don't think she would have been so aggressive. But yeah, and then she also put in a bunch of what they call reforms to try to make it more difficult for
initiatives,
particularly amateurs like us. I mean, you know, just a bunch of well, if I could use the word, hippies for, and that was with a small h. They weren't all professional hippies, but countercultural types. And
there's the turn-in November 1st of 1985 when we turned in our petition signatures there. We're going in with them.
Must be our friend Lindsay must be there.
There's Lindsay. He's waving people into the Capitol, and this is a video that Frank Mahoney made for us way back in 1985. So we still have, you're in there.
Yeah. Jack is
Jack Harris in there, and John Sajo, of course, and it was a very interesting day. I think it's going to show us going into the state capitol. There's Greg Mahalik and Laird Funk, John Sajo, Lindsay. There I am waving a little flag, and with cases of petitions. As I recall, we put those petitions up there and then opened them up, and then we realized there were a couple of ounces of marijuana at the bottom of that trunk, and we had to very carefully and judiciously remove those and take them away. And fortunately, we managed to do that. There you are in the background.
Bryce Garner.
There's Bryce, Jack Harris there. Lots of signatures. So the year before that, though, we were basically in the '84 initiative campaign cheated off the ballot. There you are, right, front and center. We were cheated off the ballot, and it was pretty public. We took Norma Paulus, Secretary of State, to court, and the Supreme Court ordered her in a writ of mandamus action to put the initiative on the ballot, and she did for just one day.
Except it was too late to get it on the ballot because it was too late. And because it was too late, so we didn't get to vote.
No. But it made it a lot easier, having done a lot of petitioning there in '85. And that's still ballot measure 5, which was voted in November of 1986. We turned it in November 1st of 1985, and that is still the record for the earliest any initiative has ever qualified for the Oregon ballot. Still holds that.
As I recall, the group, we waited perhaps a month, and then there was a meeting, and we decided to hit the brakes again.
I remember we were at your farm. I remember we had a meeting. Jack Hare was there. Most of us wanted the age to be 21, but Jack was very adamant, as I recall, and through force of personality, managed to say, it's going to be 18 or I'm not going to work on it. And everybody agreed, okay, all right, the age will be 18. Now, we only got 26.3% of the vote in the 1985 election. And it was a overwhelming crackdown of the whole federal government. We had George Bush came through the state in January for 13 days, going little town to little town. At that time, he was the vice president and also the first drug czar. And what else can you remember from that campaign?
Oh, the 84?
84 and 85, 86.
Well, I do remember we got right on it and went out petitioning, and as you said, we turned in the signatures pretty close to a year before they were due. I believe that we had a fair amount of sympathy from many of the Oregon voters because we had so obviously been screwed.
That's what I heard, is petitioning over and over again. I'm going to vote against this, but I'm going to sign to put it up for a vote because you were cheated.
You were cheated.
And I think that affected Norma Paulus when she ran for governor a few years later.
Well, she didn't get my vote.
She didn't get our votes, that's for sure. But I think there were a lot of people who didn't vote for her because they didn't think she was very honest.
Right. Well, yeah, it was. Those were great days. I got dropped off one morning in Roseburg, and the day before, this was for the Douglas County Fair. The day before, there had been a terrible accident. A helicopter carrying some cop and some news.
Looking for pot gardens.
Well, they had one. It was a setup. They were going to go up there and film a bust, and the deadline for news on that morning was 11 o'clock. So they had to hustle up, and what they were doing is they were hot dogging up the canyon. Da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da. And
I think they hit power lines.
Yeah,
or something,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
They
were overhead power lines across the river, and they smacked into it and killed a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
And so the next day I'm there, and so I'm headed for the fairgrounds, and a car full of young male citizens of Roseburg started giving me a hard time, and I just said, they were hot dogging, and the crowd just wilted because they knew that those a-holes were hot dogging up that canyon playing games with a helicopter. Don't play helicopter games, guys. Don't do that. They're dangerous.
Right. Well, they paid the price.
They paid the price.
That's for sure.
What irritated me, I know this is not kind, but the accident left, I think it was 3 kids behind. And somebody got together and decided that they were going to raise a bunch of money for these kids so that they could get a college education. So there are the 3 getting a college education because their elders were hot dogging a helicopter up a canyon and hit the power lines. So there were a lot of incidents like that. I petitioned all over the state. Sandy Burbank, you remember Sandy?
Certainly.
Sandy and I did a bunch of. We rented a motorhome, 30-footer, and
had press conferences in every little town.
We went to every town practically in Oregon.
If they had a newspaper, you visited.
We visited them, and I think that helped, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah, we went Eastern Oregon, we went Southern Oregon, we went everywhere.
I think there in the 80s, it was generally recognized that our organization, the Oregon Marijuana Initiative, registered more people than the Democrats and the Republicans combined, year after year.
Yeah.
And that still had a lasting impact on elections, and we continue to do that throughout the 90s, and it's had a big impact in the long term.
People will vote if there's something to vote for or on, and we just have to remember that voting is not democracy. Democracy is political power in the hands of the people. Voting is a charade that in current days just supports the illusion that this is democracy.
There's Ray Phelps, the guy who cheated us off the ballot that year. Today though is kind of our holiday. It wasn't a holiday back then, but now they celebrate 420 for its reference to cannabis. So I'm happy to have you on the high holiday for
cannabis.
Holiday,
yeah, yes indeed.
And I'm sure a lot of people are out there getting high as we talk, and maybe we will a little bit later. I know we have.
Can't hurt.
Yeah, it will help. Helps us live a little bit longer.
It doesn't hurt.
No.
Never has.
And that's what we finally convinced the voters of. It took a while though, a little bit longer than I thought. We have a couple of videos about the 420 holiday that we're going to run. And we'll be back in just a second after these videos. So stay tuned.
Are watching this at 4:20 a.m. For some of you, that may mean something. But there are a lot of you probably saying, so what? And the truth be told, most of us around here didn't know what 420 signified until we saw it this week on a primetime show on another network, and it wasn't even an Aaron Sorkin show. If you know what 420 is, you're laughing right now. So we invited someone in to explain. He is Stephen Hager, the editor-in-chief of High Times magazine. Good morning, Stephen.
Hi. Good morning.
So on Boston Public, on this television show, there was this big controversy about the 420 Club and the kids being involved in 420.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know what the number 420 meant, but apparently it's got some signification with marijuana use, right?
Yeah, it's been a code word for many years inside the counterculture. It's as a code for marijuana.
Now, what is it? Where did it come from?
It actually came in 1971. 6 students at San Rafael High School invented it. And it just sort of spread through the Grateful Dead underground for many years. And then High Times discovered it. And once we started publicizing it, it really went global.
So what's so special about the numbers 420?
Well, they picked 420 because it was the time of day they were going to meet to go look for an abandoned pot patch that they found a treasure map to. But it soon just became, 420 has a lot of meanings now. It can mean anything from, do you want to go smoke some pot? Do you have any pot on you? You know, is it 420 yet? Or, but it's a way for this persecuted culture to talk to each other and not be exposed to people that, like teachers or police or, people like that,
now,
outside the culture.
Is there any truth to the rumor that at 420 also meant there's marijuana, smoking, or drug use going on by the police? That was one urban myth.
That was a false rumor. People just tried to figure out where did it come from. Why is it so popular? Well, I really think that what this shows is that the counterculture, which was sort of a spiritual revolution that took place in the 60s, is really kind of like an infant baby spirituality that's birthing. And what you see here is the first real national holiday of this culture is emerging. And what's kind of interesting is that it's around the same time as all these other big holidays like Passover and Easter, and it's universally and globally adopted by millions of people now as a holiday.
Now, people are probably sitting at home going, now, why are we having a holiday celebrating an illegal activity? A holiday that parents fight to keep their kids away from doing this kind of thing.
Right.
And people who don't believe that this is a culture of any kind, that it's just an illegal activity.
I should say off the top, too, that the High Times doesn't promote the use of marijuana by children. We're very much against that. But, the counterculture has a sacrament, and that sacrament is cannabis. And we believe that the laws against it are wrong. And these are very deep-seated beliefs. So it's only natural that our first big holiday would involve cannabis.
So what's going to happen on 420? Besides people getting stoned, what's going to happen?
Well, I think that the most traditional and one of the biggest celebrations will probably be on the top of Mount Tamalpais, which is the central peak of Marin County. That's the birthplace of 420, and that's where the tradition has been established for the longest. What I'd like to see happen, I'd like to see a moment of silence for peace in the drug war. I'd like to see a moment of silence for the victims of Waco and Columbine and Oklahoma City. And I know there's a lot of, very tragic events that are happening right around the same time. And I think that we need to study why these things are happening. Why is there so much violence in our culture? And really what the 60s counterculture represents is nonviolence and peace. And this is what we're trying to bring to the table.
So you don't see 420 as part of the drug culture. You see it as part of a different kind of culture?
I see it as part of an emerging spirituality that I call the counterculture.
Now, why would something that is a counterculture, something like 420, you said at the beginning, to keep the authorities out, or parents or cops, why go public with it? There are going to be celebrations in different parts of the country and different sort of rallies. Well, now everybody knows about it, the people that...
But, when the Christians were first persecuted in Rome, they developed a secret code, the symbol of a fish. And when they would meet and they didn't know if they were Christians or not, one would draw half the fish, the other would finish the fish. Well, we've been doing 420 for a long time now, since the 70s, and it's time to bring it out into the open. It's time to show the world that we're a legitimate minority group that suffers persecution through the use of our sacrament.
Now,
So that is I believe, a 2001 interview on a Boston television station. I think Steve Hager talked about that pretty well. And you know, Steve was going to call in, but I got an obituary this morning from Paul Krasner. And I think do we have Paul Krasner on the line? Okay, let's bring him on up. Paul, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I got the obituary today for Steve Hager, who is supposed to be calling in. Tell us about that obituary. That's kind of a prank in itself, isn't it?
It absolutely was a prank, but a good prank has, you know, something that's not just taking somebody and making them feel bad. When I was the editor of Lenny Bruce's book called I forget the title of it, but it was decades ago. But I edited his book, and we were friends. And he was starting getting busted more and more and more, and then there would be clubs who would not want him to play on their stage because they were threatened with from the cops. Excuse me?
Obscenity laws. They said his use of expletives was obscene, right?
Well, they said that because he really got in trouble, but they didn't say it. It was for the I hear an echo. That's why I'm swirling.
Pay no attention to the echo in your phone.
Okay. So anyway,
the man behind the curtain.
Then he really got in trouble because he was a target of his satire was leaders of organized religion, but they couldn't say that because there was no blasphemy laws. So that's why you know it's why he got arrested year after year. Mm-hmm. One year was, I think, 15 busts altogether. So I decided to write in my magazine, The Realist, an article, an obituary about Lenny. And the reason was because in the context of it, I could tell the things that in that context. And I remember letting his mother and his girlfriend and a couple of friends know, so that they would see the obituary I made up. You know, they would know.
Be dumbstruck and heartbroken.
Exactly.
And so you did something similar to what you did for Lenny Bruce back in the 60s, right. 50 years ago now,
right.
For Steve Hager today. Tell us about Steve Hager and the 420 phenomenon.
Right. The reason I mentioned the Lenny story was because Lenny had read that obituary, and that was what made him think of it. That was the basis. So, what did you say before I interrupted?
About Steve Hager and 420. Excuse me.
Okay. This was, first of all, it was to get the persons who actually who did it. People in the papers, you know, who did it. Some of them thought it was a police number or something.
Yeah, that's what I heard at first.
Yeah, and then there were others too, and so
I had my own time. For me, it was always 3:33 because that was the time of day we'd all get together, and okay, it's 3:30. It would just happen to be the time we'd look. It's 3:33, but 420 caught on a lot wider audience. I guess the Grateful Dead helped carry that globally.
Well, I'll read the first paragraph of the obituary because and right in there he would become the information for people who didn't know in the first paragraph. So may I read that now?
Please.
Okay. It's a sad irony. When Stephen Hager was the editor of High Times magazine, he was contacted by the Waldos, a group of high school students who coined 420 as the time to toke at the intermission between their classes each day. And Stephen became the first journalist to interview them, just because he was, as I say, he was as the editor of High Times at that point. However, he chose to commit suicide today on Mount Tam at 4:20 a.m. on the 20th of April, sort of like a contemporary marijuana boomerang. So there was one right there. First of all, Steve wanted to have credit for it, and he wanted to say how these students did it. You know, that it was just a little time to get stoned and then go back to the next class, which did much better.
Right. Well, Paul, I want to thank you for calling in and helping spread the word, and your lifetime of activism. You started the Realist magazine. For what was the time period that the Realist was published?
From 1958 to 2001.
And it's considered why did they call it an underground newspaper?
Oh well, there. You know, it wasn't. It was when I published early that John F. Kennedy had been a woman who was his secret. It was a secret, a previous marriage before he was. What happened was the bishop or the cardinal, I don't know which one, up in New England. It was in the what they call the places that called back to the family. You know, the what's the word I want? My vocabulary is leaking. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Compound. So Dr. Arthur thinks.
Right. Anyway, the thing was that well, I guess I can. The thing is that Lenny was being not getting what he deserved, and essentially that's what Steve he was not getting what he deserved.
Yeah.
And
so that's why you wrote the obituary, kind of as a replay of what you'd done for Lenny Bruce a long time ago.
Yeah, there was a parallel, except it was my idea. This was Steve's idea, and so I ended the. I'll read it so I get the exact words. I wanted to put in his words. What his suicide was like, explaining that, and this is just one paragraph, a quote. I got kicked to the curb and lost access to all the wonderful things I created. The entire cannabis scene is a great turnoff, fueled by a lot of greedy carpetbaggers. But money changes everything. I was the first on hip-hop and fled that scene when the corporations moved in and kicked the first generation to the curb. My death to the world of cannabis is timely and will deter any of the carpetbaggers from trying to deploy me in any of the marketing schemes. And so that was something too, because it's very interesting that it's great that there are the dispensaries, especially in California. I live in the Desert Hot Springs, in Southern California, and I used to go to where the city council was, and we're trying to get Prop 215, and which was for medical marijuana. And so they would come to me and say, I voted for that, but they didn't want to do it because they were chicken. It was that simple. And then one of the council people found out that the people who were stoned in Desert Hot Springs would have to take a ride to Palm Springs and go to the dispensary there, and they were getting a lot of tax money. It was so the council
changed their mind there in Desert Hot Springs.
The what?
They changed their mind and allowed them to open in Desert Hot Springs. Then
Right.
I take it.
The LA Times had a headline, and it changed the name to Desert Pot Springs.
All right.
So-
Well, come to Desert Hot Springs. Well, Paul, I want
Right.
to thank you for coming on, and hope to have you back on the show again sometime soon.
Okay, all right. I enjoyed it, and I think that Steve is.
We have a photo with you there somewhere.
Uh-huh.
Maybe we'll pull that up here in a minute.
Okay. Take care, Paul.
All right. Thank you.
Have fun. Bye-bye.
It's interesting having Paul Krasner on. He's a legend there.
I think Lenny Bruce's book was How to Talk Dirty.
Yeah.
I have a copy of it.
All right. Yeah, that's what they said he was in trouble for anyway. I think we have a phone call. Welcome to the show, caller. Hello.
Hello?
Hey, John.
Hey, Paul. I didn't know if I counted as the caller or what.
You are the caller.
How you doing?
Thank you.
I'm
we
the
have
caller.
John
All
Sajal.
right.
John and you were both chief petitioners.
John's the hero.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't hear nearly enough about John.
That's true. I've been trying to get him to come back on the show, but it's been a while. There's a picture of you in your younger days, John, there at the state capitol turning in signatures in 1985.
Oh, handsome devil, wasn't I?
Yeah.
You were.
And you wore a tie and a suit, and you were a marvelous spokesperson.
What happened?
He got tired like the rest of us, I
Right.
suppose.
Yep.
Well, although, remember, you and Paul, you just kept hammering. I had to get out. I had advice of counsel to keep my head down and my mouth shut. And so I kind of had to get out at that point. And but you guys kept in there, kept the pressure on, and the legislature would not have gotten off of their dead hind ends if Paul and you had not kept hammering at them. They had to pay attention.
Yep.
So you're at a 420 celebration down in Roseburg now.
Well, now I'm actually up on the top of a mountain between there and my house. We wound it down, and I'm up here, up in the clouds, celebrating 420 again.
Good, good. So tell us how you and Fred got together and put marijuana legalization on the ballot back in the 80s.
Wow. That was a long
2
time
minutes
ago.
or less.
Yeah, well,
however long it takes. We've got 13 minutes.
we knew it was wrong, and back then there weren't very many of us, and I remember there was me and a small collection of people doing it, and I can't remember if we met Fred in person but I remember he wrote us a check for like $200, and then we thought, oh wow, we got so much money, we're going to legalize marijuana, and that was pretty exciting, and we worked together and found more and more people along the way, and made history. I mean, really, we've come a long way, and it's hard to remember what it was like back then, but because everything's so much about the industry and the money, and everybody's got a job, and back then there were just a handful of us that we knew something was wrong, and we just set out to fix it, and the money and everything else came later, and we didn't worry about it so much then. We just worried about trying to do the right thing, and I think we were spot on, although I remember back then we used to talk about how, when we legalize it, the money will take over, and boy, we didn't have enough time to think about all that, but that that certainly was true, and it's some crazy times. I'm glad people aren't going to prison, but watching the overregulation of marijuana, the dismantling of medical marijuana, and this tremendous economic shift from poor people and small farmers to corporations and rich people. There's a sad element to it too, but I'm continuing to fight for all those things that I fought for at the beginning, and I guess the struggle is far from over.
It is, there's farther to go, that's for sure. What do you think about the centralization of control of the industry today, and how, I mean, you're living in Douglas County, right? And your county won't even allow dispensaries.
Right, there's none in the county,
cannabis growing region.
Yeah, no, it's been that's been very devastating for the local farmers, and as the rules have piled up on medical, making that harder and harder for people. That's been difficult too, but things are moving forward. There's 6 cannabis stores in Roseburg. The cities didn't necessarily opt out in Douglas County.
I see.
I'm working now on Mojo Universe, which is going to be a place to come and enjoy cannabis and study it and evaluate it and have a great time. And there's always new frontiers, and I think that's the new frontier. We've created this system of money and commerce and profit around marijuana, but it seems like a lot of the state has forgotten that it's really about love and enjoying it and fellowship with your friends, and so that's what we're working on again, and it's pretty exciting, and I think people are ready for it. So that's the next frontier in cannabis, is actually those of us who love it and enjoy it being able to get together in public and do it. And so I hope you'll come down to Mojo Universe in Roseburg pretty soon, Paul, and
I look forward to it.
Celebrate that with us.
I look forward to it. I noticed you've done some great rock work there. You're an expert of finding and creating incredible stonework in your home and at this Mojo Universe.
Well, I really like to get stoned. That's what I've been saying my whole life. And
everybody should get stoned.
Hey, we've got another video of you here. Boy, you've changed, but haven't we all, right?
Yep.
I think you're in the state legislature here, the Umpqua Cannabis Association video here. We've got your website up on the screen.
Cool. I can't quite picture what you're looking at, but
well, when you get to your computer, you can watch it if you like.
All right.
Anything you want to say in closing, John? Anything about Fred or 420?
What's that?
Anything you want to say in closing about Fred or 420 or?
Well, I'd like to thank Fred for being there when he was and being there now. I love you, Fred, and it's been always a pleasure to work with you. And I hope we get to see each other in person soon. And I hope you can get down to Mojo too. It's a fun place, and right off I-5, and we're going to have rooms for people to stay, and eventually a restaurant, and all kinds of great stuff. And
you and Louis Montana have opened that up together.
Yep,
that's where the name comes from. Montana, yep. Mo, and Joe. That's you.
Yep, exactly. And I guess I'd just like to tell your viewers to, medical marijuana is being threatened, but it's not over. And there's now the Oregon Cannabis Commission that was formed to protect it, and they're going to be doing a listening tour in the next few months. And we're continuing to try to save and improve medical marijuana. And my latest mission in that front is that we now have over 1 million pounds of marijuana in the inventory of the OLCC system. They're only going to sell less than a third of that. And I'm trying to work with the commission to create a program where all the patients in the medical marijuana program get free marijuana out of all that surplus.
Right on.
And if you look at the numbers, there's 50,000 patients now. If every patient got 2 pounds, that would only be 100,000 pounds. There's more than 10 times that in excess in the system now. So we can do this, and people need to focus on that and visualize it and help me make it happen, because medical marijuana is not over. It's going through some hard times, and a lot of patients are going without medicine. Well, there's more marijuana than ever in Oregon, and that's not right, and we can fix that. So stay tuned, people.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for being available tonight. Happy 420.
Yeah, happy 420 to you guys, and I look forward to celebrating with you in person the next time.
I do look forward to that as well. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye. So, you know, Fred, right behind you, there's this banner, our logo for the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation. A Israeli-Canadian oil company has come in and through a bizarre court action managed to make us turn this banner around. We cannot use our own logo, even though we're still in a court battle. This Israeli-Canadian oil company, Adira Energy, has come in and stolen my multi-million-dollar clinic business, and I'm locked in a battle. They spent $1.5 million on lawyers. I spent $150,000 on lawyers. That tells the tale right there. I'm outgunned more than 10 to 1. And
a lot of money in marijuana.
There is, there is. And they've managed to steal 270,000 patient records and surreptitiously take them off to Canada and sell them. At the same time, they continue to control our old clinic business. So I want to urge you, if you are looking for a physician to help you get a medical marijuana permit, do not go to my old clinic, Empower Clinics. If you have any of these conditions, we have doctors who can help you. Just give us a call at 503-235-4606. We'll be happy to give you more information about this bizarre corporate takeover by Adira Energy, an Israeli-Canadian oil company. And so we have a physician referral service. We can send you doctors all across the country. Just call us at 503-235-4606. I always have to throw that in.
Oh, of course. Pays to advertise.
It does, it does. So you also ran and got more votes as a libertarian than any other candidate in a third-party candidate, that's what they call them, than any other candidate in state history. Isn't that right?
That's right. That was in the days before. The libertarian was a dirty word then.
Yeah.
But it wasn't nearly as dirty as it became. The party was kind of...
What year was that? You were up against David Frohnmeyer.
Yeah, Dave Frohnmeyer and Norma.
Uh-huh.
And so the churches, the Pounders, put up a candidate because because they figured I was going to take votes from Norma. So they the Pounders put up a candidate. God, I can't even remember his name now.
I can't either.
But
you got what, like more than 15% of the vote?
More than 15%.
Which gave the Libertarian Party
ballot
access for years to come.
Yeah, yeah.
Up until then, you had to gather signatures each and every year to make the ballot. But because you had broken the what was it? I think 5%. You burst it wide open with 15%. Yeah. You had permanent ballot access for some time after that.
We'd have had more if it hadn't been for the Pounder.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a fun campaign, and I miss our good friend Lindsay.
Me too.
I tell you.
Me too. Lindsay Bradshaw. Who's in that video?
He's the one that roped me into the whole thing. He said, "Fred, you gotta be a chief petitioner." Why do I have to be a chief petitioner? Because you're a doctor. Well, okay. And you're not in practice. Okay, well, that's true. And the State Board of Medical Examiners even at one point said, "Well, doctor, there's not much we can do to you." And I smiled and said, "Yeah, that's right." Because
they wanted to, though.
10 years later, they got to me. I was going to have to take tests.
They got to Dr. Levesque too, unfortunately.
Yeah, which terrible. They should not have done that. I had stand in my side yard full of cops listening to couple of those jerks badmouth Phil Levesque, and I was being circumspect, or I would have asked him how many degrees he had. You know, Phil was a grunt in World War II.
That's right.
With Patton Patton's Third
a
Army.
scout in the infantry.
Yeah, and
co-hosted our show for many years.
yes, I
had
really
his
liked
90th
Bill.
birthday party right here, I'm happy to say.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. We had
Well,
the cake right here on the stage.
he was a great guy. He signed off on my record a couple times.
Yep.
And
we used to see patients right here in this studio. That's how we got started.
Signed my first card.
Yeah. Here's some hempcrete. Have you seen hempcrete? That's hemp concrete. It's made from hemp fiber. We have hemp seed oil burning a hemp flame right here. We call this the hemp flame of freedom. And this is the real reason marijuana is illegal, is because as the Kentucky attorney taught me to say, it's the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, fascist sons of a bitches who prohibited marijuana to protect the fuel industry primarily.
Yep.
And so we like to burn that here. Well, we're down to just about a minute left. I want to thank you for coming on, Fred.
Well, thank you,
you,
Paul.
Eric. It's good to
Anytime.
see you there. Mr. John Cornett is going to play us a song. And I want to thank you guys for watching. We will have a tape show next week. Then we're going to prepare for the Global Marijuana March. We have our next live show on May 4th, and we'll be down at Pioneer Courthouse Square on Saturday, May 5th for the Global Marijuana March. So we hope to see you down there. We'll be talking about it on the show in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching. Thank you, John. Thank you, viewers, and help us restore him.
Well, the next time that you fall in love, just appreciate the sun above, 'cause the sun is shining on and on. So open up your eyes, for it's gone. Whoa, oh, whoa, let's make the best of it now. Whoa, let's make the best of it now.